Work is actually not fundamentally painful. At a very basic level, it's using our skills to create value. My work can be fun. I'm a human being with only so many days on the planet that it's worth making these days fun for myself and those of my team. And then once you start from that mindset, you can think about how can we be more brilliant and braver in our work. It's not like you do work and then you have fun and you go back to work. The work itself is the fun part. It's fun to build things with other people. It's fun to see the impact of our work. All of that is actually the cake of work, not the icing, and that part is fun.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Lavin Voices, a podcast of the Lavin Agency. I'm your host, Charles Yao, and our guest today is Bree Groff. Bree is the author of Today Was Fun, a book about work, seriously. The seriously is in parentheses. It's a totally refreshing look at how companies and workers alike can rethink and reimagine life and culture at work. It gets so much right about how most people spend the majority of their days. It's a very human book about the workplace. Cal Newport, the champion of deep work, says that Bree offers a powerful argument. Oliver Burkeman, who wrote 4,000 Weeks, calls Bree's book exuberant, practical, inspiring, and necessary. I'd second that. Here's my conversation with Bree. Where are you today?
I'm at home.
Okay. In New York, in Brooklyn.
Yeah. In Manhattan, Tribeca.
Tribeca. Okay.
Yes.
So you're not above Canal Street.
No. Yes. Squarely below.
Yes. So just to start, I think your thesis is that we've normalized a lot of things about work and work culture that are unhealthy. I think your phrase is patently ridiculous. A very fun phrase. So just to start, can you enumerate some of those things? Can you just splash a little water on our faces to make us maybe see some things we take for granted that aren't normal about work?
Absolutely. Actually, you gave a talk this morning, and we started the talk with a game of Never Have I Ever. If you know this game, it's like a sleepover game from when you were 12, and you essentially put down fingers if you have done the thing. And so some of the prompts were, never have I ever made it to 4 p.m. without eating lunch because I was too busy working. And then finger goes down. Never have I ever seen a friend or family member as a distraction from work. Finger goes down. Never have I ever canceled or not scheduled a doctor's appointment because I was too busy working. Another one, those are all about overwork, but there were others. Never have I ever looked at my work and realized I wasn't actually doing anything bold or interesting. That's all the chapter on brilliant work. There are so many parts of work that I think we normalize when we say, what's keeping you up at night? Like, hopefully nothing. Hopefully you're sleeping. You're a human being who needs to rest at night. And yet how common is it that we say things like, oh, is it only Wednesday? Because we all agree that getting through the week is our goal as opposed to enjoying our days on the planet. So it's just a sampling of things that we have normalized that I'm trying to unnormalize.
Bree, can I ask, at the end of your exercise, sadly, was every finger of every hand down?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's the point. I've rigged the game. Right? Like, I know what's going to put their fingers down. But yes, this was an audience of HR executives. And so even the people responsible for culture and healthy work practices, they're not immune from it either.
And, we don't have to dwell into how this came to be. I think we can accept that this sounds true. I think it matches with the lived experience of a lot of people. So let's focus a bit on, I guess, how to turn the tide. So what is one of the first things you do to suggest this doesn't have to be the way it is? And we can actually, as you say, inject fun into work. Yeah.
So, much of the premise of the book where I start is that work is actually not fundamentally painful. I think we're often fed a story, one of two stories, really. One, which is work is called work for a reason. Of course it sucks. Of course it's hard. That's why we call it work. But actually, there's nothing about the definition of work that has pain in there. So I use the physics definition, which is work equals force times distance. It's just some effort that makes a difference. There's nothing about pain in the equation. There's nothing about back-to-back meetings. It's just simply at a very basic level, it's using our skills to create value. Or sometimes I'll say we get paid not because work is painful and people wouldn't do it otherwise. We get paid because we create value and people, want that, whether it's paid or unpaid labor. So first, I try and pull apart the notions of pain and work as inextricably linked. And then once we do that, we can find other ways to inject fun into our work. But it really starts with the premise of of believing that my work can be fun, my work days should be fun. I'm a human being with only so many days on the planet, that it's worth making these days fun for myself and those of my team. And then once you start from that mindset, you can think about, well, how can we do this more collaboratively or in a way that builds camaraderie? How can we be more brilliant and braver in our work? All sorts of questions come from there.
And you look to the world of science to define work, literally what work means. How would you define fun? Because I think that might actually be something people hesitate on.
I know. It's true. I get asked this a lot, and I don't know if it's me being curmudgeonly, but I usually hesitate to offer a definition, and I don't in the book. I'll explain why, and then I'll explain the closest thing I have to a definition because I've obliged. I don't like to define it because I think it is so individual. It's visceral. It's almost childlike. And when I ask someone, like, when's the last time you had fun? They can usually recognize in themselves how they've defined it. And they can always recognize if they're not having fun. I think I wanted to be broad and visceral and childlike. In some ways, because fun is different for different people. So I know sometimes the word sounds like you must be laughing, or you must be like really excited, I'm having fun, or there must be party hats or ping pong tables. Maybe, that's legit, but also maybe fun is getting really into some research. I know lots of people. My husband's a PhD in math. Like, he finds equations super fun in a way that many wouldn't. So it can vary what it looks like. The best definition I think that I've come away with is and this will sound controversial, it's very similar to Esther Perel, thank you, definition of eroticism, where she describes eroticism as a quality of vitality, of feeling alive. There's a hint of spontaneity in there, which I reference this definition in the book. But ultimately, I think it's that sense of aliveness, of vitality, whatever that feels like for you.
So it can glom onto many aspects of the job, because when you said, oh, you can make work fun, one way for me is you could hire the B-52s to play in the atrium every day. That's fun, but it probably doesn't lead to a better workplace. Which brings me to my next question, which is that let's talk about what the book is, but let's talk about what the book is not. It's not necessarily a down with work type of tome. And it's not trying to Trojan horse in, buy some beanie bag chairs and get the Levings to do the work. So let's situate the book, and then let's get into how to incorporate fun into work. But what is the book not?
Well, first, I think to your point about hiring some musicians to play in the lobby, I hold a very strong belief that it's not like you do work and then you have fun and you go back to work. So it's not that. Now, you may have fun at your happy hour. That's great. Love a happy hour. But also, I hold a strong belief that the work itself is the fun part. As in, it's fun to use our skills. It's fun to build things with other people. It's fun to see the impact of our work. It's fun to learn new things. Like, all of that is actually the cake of work, not the icing. And that part is fun. So when I situate the larger philosophy of the book, I mentioned the work is called work for a reason. That's the sort of down with work. Work is a transaction. To think otherwise is silly, to not live in reality. There's also another end of the spectrum, which is do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. And that, I think, too far. Now, some people do feel that way, and good work if you can get it. That is amazing. But I think there are two problems with that end of the spectrum. One is that is such a high bar for most people that it actually has the effect of making people feel bad about themselves. I don't love my work. Am I doing something wrong? Am I wasting my life? Should I have a different job and a different job after that to find the holy grail of my calling? And I just don't think that's healthy. Second of all, that level of all-in passion often breeds overwork, because now if your work is your calling, why are you doing anything else? Like, if that's what you're put on the planet to do, don't eat, don't have a family. That's it. So I think that for most people is too far. So I would situate the book in the middle, where work is just a nice way to spend our days on the planet. It's not down with work, nor is it the glorifying of work. It's just, what are we going to do on the planet while we're here? Well, after you have enough money to eat and sleep and you have shelter and a few basics, well, maybe it would be fun to try and build something that makes people's lives better. So that's in the center, a third way.
Can I throw 4 syllables at you that comes up at every human resources conference, which is the notion of work-life balance? And in that image, we see a teetering of two, as if work is diametrically opposite to life and vice versa. So what are your general thoughts around it?
Yes. So people have a love-hate relationship with this word or this concept. And I'm of two minds about it. So there's sort of the work-life balance. There's also a work-life integration camp out there. Work-life integration, I'm a fan of for generally smaller businesses, solopreneurs, entrepreneurs. If you have some degree of control over your time and want to mix up your day where work is just one thing that you do out of a bigger life, and you're running to a doctor's appointment and then you're going to get back on a call, then I think that's great. I am a fan of the term work-life balance when you're working for a larger organization where you may not have as much control. And that's because, well, one, it's a simple concept that people generally get what you say when you say it, like, I need better work-life balance. It shows up on many employee surveys. And also, I think to throw away that term within the context of an overworking society or organization is a little bit dangerous and leads to what Microsoft called the infinite workday. This notion that year over year, evening and weekend meetings are up. This sort of, you're always on, you wake up in the morning and you roll over and you pick up your phone. Meanwhile, you didn't say good morning to whoever's lying next to you in bed, a pet or a partner. So I like the concept, and I think it's really important to talk about when there is potential for extraction when in that sort of larger context.
And that's a lot of the theory and the culture around it. So let's get down to some brass tacks. Let's say you are a company and you've decided, Bree's right. There is a dearth of fun at our work. We do want to inject it. We understand that the benefits are plenty. So what is the first step to change over the culture to say, we've decided we are going to have fun?
So it's a tricky question to answer. I've been a consultant for over a decade or so. So there's big structural things you can do. You can adopt a 4-day work week, right? You can look at your hiring practices and your workload. Some of those things are really important. So I don't want to be flippant about the bigger structural things. The book is really aimed at the manager level or the individual level. Like, you have some control over your sphere of work. So I also want to be clear about, well, one, my expertise is in the organizational level, but the book doesn't speak to that quite as much. The book speaks to you, team leader with a couple direct reports, or you individual. What are you, or even like HR leader, what are you going to do for your team? The book also has a ton of practical exercises too. So as a place to start, Bree, what's the very first thing that you want to do? Well, one, which is a little bit more mindset shift, I would look to the executive team to say, execs, are you having any fun? How are you dressing? Are you all in suits all day? Do you sit with perfect posture in your meeting? Are your decks all perfectly designed and buttoned up? Are you stressed out and overworked, and are you leaking that to your teams? So there's that sort of shift of, in plain language, executive team, are you fun to hang out with? I don't know. Like, are you laughing? Are you modeling it? That, I think, is the most powerful way to start. More practically, as I mentioned, there's so many tips in the books. In the book, things like holding a do nothing day, which is essentially an unstructured offsite, which could be for your leadership team or any functional team. It's just a day to be out of the pressure cooker of back-to-back meetings and holding time to really deeply think about, what do we want our next year to look like? What do we want this project to look like? So there's lots of instructions on how to do that. There's things like holding, the simplest thing I know to do is to do a check-in every day with every team. And that's just simply an exercise of, it's a morning stand-up or it's a weekly meeting to say, hey, how's everybody doing on a scale of 1 to 5? Oh, put up your fingers. I'm a 3, I'm a 2, I'm 1. Just run around the room and say why in 30 seconds. Oh, we got a new puppy. It's so fun. But the puppy is like rocking my world. I'm a 2. I'm actually really nervous about this presentation we have coming up. So that is like at the smallest level. And then obviously, as I mentioned, like bigger structural things that you can do to curb the workload and also inject more time and space for the creativity and fun. No hiring of bands required.
Let me ask a question about Do Nothing Day, where you say you give over a day to just do nothing, but to think through things. How is that different from just having a day off and just not coming to work?
Oh, because these are working days and generally with your team. So if you work individually or a solopreneur, then yes, you could do a do nothing day by yourself, which is just thinking. I have done these since I thought of the idea with every single consulting team I've had since. And usually what happens, we kick off a consulting engagement. We do some sort of discovery work up front, and then we stop. We say, okay, we've learned a bunch. What's the most powerful, impactful thing we could build for the client? Now, probably we've scoped some of this, but the client is paying us for our brilliant ideas. Like that's why we get the big bucks. We don't get the big bucks because we're really fast at responding to email. So we take that day as an unstructured working day. Usually we go to Little Island in New York here, just a nice park, and they have some food trucks. And we just literally, we sit around for a whole day and kind of just shoot the shit about the project. Like, oh, what if we did that? Oh, actually, what if we did that? When someone comes up with a really great idea, we write it down. The whole concept really rests on the notion that our brains we are not wired to do our most expansive creative thinking in 30-minute blocks. This is why so many of our ideas come out in the shower, because it's like one of the few times during the day when we can actually like let our brains be free and they're not trying to achieve something other than maybe shampooing our hair. So that's the genesis of the Do Nothing Day. It's not a bed rot day, although I'm a fan of that too. It's a day, you can think of it as a do nothing day, but a think everything day.
And I mean, you mentioned there the kind of regime of the 9-to-5 workday, which I guess is a relic of the industrial era. Are you a big fan of that, or would you do away with that? Because as you say, things don't fall so easily within these prescribed timeframes to get the best ideas.
It's functional for some people. I myself, now that I've been on this author journey, like don't have the constraints of a 9-to-5, and yet I still generally find myself working within the 9-to-5. It has its pros and cons. The pros are that, of course, in a large organization, you sort of have to be like, hey, when are we all going to be around? The cons, of course, are the flexibility, the days when you wake up and you're like, your brain is just not having it. So I do love a 4-day work week and constraining some of that time. I'm also a fan of a 4-day work week, but sort of chopped up throughout the week. I think what we especially will need to consider in the age of AI is if what we need from human brains is uniquely human, because AI is taking so much of the rest of whatever coordination, operationalizing things, then we have to be even more attuned to what human brains need. So generally, sure, it makes sense to have some sort of like agreed upon working block so that you don't feel like you're on all hours. But I do love the notion of designing workplace practices that work for you and your team, not the other way around. So whether that be everyone has a 2-hour block in the afternoon for heads down time, And it so happens that if someone needs to go to the doctor or something, they fit it in that time. There's lots of ways to play with the structure of the working day. And so mostly when I'm pro is at the team level, designing working practices that work for you.
I would imagine going forward as you design team practices, as you mentioned, AI becomes a part of that. And there are things that AI does well. There are burdens that they lift up from humans. And you mentioned that we should do things that make humans be good at the most human things they can do. So how do we design around that? What is it literally that humans need to be the most human and creative?
Yeah. So we need some input, right? Like it's the old computer science term, garbage in, garbage out. If you put in bad code, bad things come out. So same for humans. We need time to learn, to absorb. This could be, at my most whimsical, going to a museum, but it could also be simply learning about another function's role or a product in another part of the organization, having some time to stay up to date with the industry. So there's some sort of input that people need. There's some processing time, and people process differently. So some people really want heads down time, which is why I'm a fan of an hour or two of heads down blocks a day. Not everyone will appreciate that, but the people who really need to hunker down and write out their thoughts or work on something do. Some people like me are social processors, so I actually don't mind some meetings because I want to talk it out and figure out, well, what do you think? And here's what I think. And, oh, that's a better idea. So there's some processing that needs to be done. And then there needs to be some amount of slack in the system in order to produce above average work. And so I guess what I mean by that is most organizations are wired to eliminate all slack, not the tech tool, the Notion. They're wired to squeeze every bit of efficiency out of a meeting or a human or a day. And frankly, as humans, if our competitive advantage is going to be to play, to dream, to think compassionately about our customers or clients, then we need some time to mess up. We need some time to play. We need some time to kick around ideas. And so what I hope is that workplaces become more expansive in that way. And then we can let the AI do all of the run 24 hours a day to get all the other stuff done that we as humans are not as good at anymore.
To kind of broaden, as you say, the emotional palette of what's acceptable at work, what is permissible. In some ways, you're talking about psychological safety, the feeling that
for sure
employees are free to play. Can you just talk a bit about how that fits into your book, Psychological Safety?
Yeah, it's basically all of chapter 2. I could have called it psychological safety, but instead I thought it was catchier to say that your brain works in just as well in a suit as stretchy pants. That chapter is all about, it's my rant, my debunking of professionalism, because I think professionalism is what gets in the way, or I should restate, performative professionalism is what gets in the way of psychological safety. Now, lots of things do, I think, but this to me is the most apparent and resonant. So the idea that in our dress, we should be dressing up in suits and ties, that everyone is making their presentations look very formal and respectable. Everyone is pulling from the same data because I don't want to get in trouble and cite any rogue sources. It's this idea that when you get dressed in the morning for work, that you need your business outfit, but you also need your business mask, or that way of being palatable or presentable in the office. And the word palatable, I think, is just terrible. It's like, you're going to chew me up, but I'd like to taste nice as you're chewing me up. I think that's what palatable means in that context. But what it does ultimately is it stifles our human expression. It stifles our creativity. It's bad for business because now people are not sharing their best, bravest ideas. They're just sort of trying to fit in so they don't fall below some mean. But it's also really personally bad for us because it's hard for us to enjoy ourselves if we don't first feel like ourselves. If I feel like I am not safe here, that I need to perform in order to be taken seriously, the last thing I'm thinking about is, am I having a good day? Is this day worthy of my finite life? No, I'm thinking about like, how do I say something really, really smart? I'm only going to have 1 second to jump in for this meeting. And so to get rid of some of that performative professionalism, I think is what unleashes ultimately the psychological safety you mentioned.
And in terms of being a manager, how do you actually know if the people working alongside you and for you are putting on the so-called business mask and are being performatively professional?
I mean, it's a little bit of a judgment call, right? Of course, if you're a manager, any sort of position of power, people are going to want to please you, maybe because they like you, or maybe they just think that or know that you control their paychecks and their employment. So, of course, some of that will be natural, but I also think an empathetic manager can tell if somebody is not often speaking up in meetings, is backtracking on something that they say, that maybe you see a glimmer of, oh, that's such interesting work. Where was that before? That maybe there's something that you could cultivate there. It is a little bit hard, but what I think a manager or a leader can do, the best thing they can do is model it themselves, such that when they create an environment of, I'm just a human being who's at work, it allows for other people to feel that as well. It's important to not to pressure people into bringing too much of themselves to work. I bring a lot of myself to work, but you don't have to be like, tell me everything about how you slept last night. What was your sleep score? What are your pillows like? It's just like, some things you can keep to yourself. But I do think people should feel welcome to more or less show up as they are. And so that's what I try and do. I show up to meetings with my hair wet all the time. I'm always talking about, I don't know, if my daughter was kind of sassy in the morning and I'm in a bad mood, I say that. So people aren't like, why is she in a bad mood? Those sorts of things can also then model humanity for others.
I mean, one contention of your book is that fun is not diametrically opposed to work. Done right, it really is a core part of work, makes work better. We do become more efficient. I know that's not the point of your book, is to, buy into efficiency culture, but we get more creative, we're more innovative, we do better. Can you just really make the point to someone, let's play the devil's advocate, who's really cynical and is like, a lot of the stuff that you mentioned is not productive. It's just the way it is. It's actually above my pay grade to change. Going to an island and just doing nothing seems like the worst possible idea. So can you just really hit the nail on the head to say this is why fun actually matters in the way that people that are only interested in business can understand?
Okay, I have a professional answer, and then I'm going to give my real answer. Here's my professional answer first. Yes, person only interested in business. Companies with highly engaged employees are 17% more productive, 21% more profitable. Gallup has some amazing research that shows that having a best friend at work is highly correlated with business outcomes, including, if I can rattle these off, retention, of course, but also productivity, inventory control of all things, safety. So there's real reason why you would want to invest in people being happy and having friends. Now, there's about 5,001 business, 20,001 business books about making the business case for employee engagement. There's so much data out there, and I get it. I'm not that interested in making that case anymore. One, because it has been done, but two, I think it's missing the bigger case, which to me is the existential case for employee engagement. So I would say to that leader who's only interested in the bottom line, like, hey, are you having any fun? Like the song says, like, what you getting out of living? And I think further, I'd make the case, like I, in my career as a leader, have had 2 team members who have passed away. And I think about them all the time. And the very last thing on my mind is whether I extracted the most business value out of them. I don't give 2 shits. Like, they did their jobs. They contributed to the client project. They contributed to the work. what I think about now when I think about them is when I was a steward of a few of their finite days on the planet, was I a good steward of those days? Did they laugh? Were those days okay? Were they generally happy? Because ultimately they ran out of Mondays. And then the leap we have to make is we all are going to run out of Mondays. They are not a renewable resource. And, business focused person who only wants to squeeze the most from your employees, you're going to run out of Mondays too. And what do you want to look back on? Do you want to look back on, I made people happy so that I could earn a few more dollars, or I actually created like really joyful, productive employment where people could make a living and also make impact in the world? That's really beautiful. So, that's my case.
Yeah, that was very beautifully said. Can I just go sideways? You've worked with a lot of companies like Pfizer. They make drugs, among other things. You've also worked, I think, with Hilton, and they have a lot of customer-facing people. So I guess it's one thing to work daily with people that you're going to come across. It is ultimately, as big as a company is, it's a finite amount of people, a lot of repetition. How do you make work fun that is customer-facing, where the customer is just literally anyone who walks in front of you at any given time?
A friend of mine told me a great story. She worked in a Dunkin' Donuts, one of her first jobs out of high school or so. And she recounted it as one of the most fun jobs she ever had, because what they would do is they would compete on who could get more tips. They would compete on who could make the drinks the fastest or the best. I think what's interesting is that, sure, you could say, you're caffeinating the world, and you could think about purpose or meaning, but no, it was really just like, are you and your colleague, can you have a good time with the people you're with? Can you make some fun even out of a situation that's maybe like, I'm just checking people into hotels? And then further it's actually, I think, quite an advantage to work on the front lines in terms of that sort of feedback. So Hilton, for example, and maybe they still do, would give out a cookie at check-in. Now, who doesn't want to get a cookie? I think that actually what's harder is the middle level marketing manager who's like 10 steps away from any impact. If you are, say, a barista and handing someone their coffee in the morning and see them light up, you actually get the benefit of the impact right in front of your eyes. And so, of course, there's always going to be industries or situations where that's less, where you're maybe with frustrated customers. I also worked with a call center of a cancer center where people are highly distraught and fighting to get their loved ones in there. And still, we helped them find ways to find joy and camaraderie and impact in their work, even when the interactions were really hard.
And all those illustrations point to the scale that fun can happen at, because you talked before about purpose and the existential stuff of like, what am I even doing? What am I contributing? With the cancer call center, that's taken care of. But then at the hour-to-hour basis, how do you still have fun? With the Dunkin' Donuts, it's still like, how can I get through the next hour and have fun with my coworkers?
Yeah, and I think the beauty of it is you actually don't need purpose and meaning to enjoy your work. And I know that's a controversial thing to say because purpose and meaning have really risen in the business discourse. And I get it. I like my work to be purposeful and meaningful, but it's actually not strictly necessary. And I often point to the show, The Office, if you've seen it, and many people have, where they're a paper sales company. There's no purpose or meaning. And yet the show was not meant to demonstrate that you need purpose or meaning. It also wasn't meant to demonstrate that work sucks. It was actually meant to demonstrate that without purpose or meaning, you can still find fun in your work if you make it so. It was on them to make the pranks and to make friends and fall in love with your colleagues, which maybe is not recommended all places. But I think that's the beauty of it. Even if you're working at Dunkin' Donuts and handing people coffee and watching them smile, that's actually a really gorgeous thing at a local level, to feel like helping another human on a one-to-one level That is important. And actually, I think it's like capitalism that has convinced us it isn't, because most businesses only operate with the idea that scale is the end all and be all. And if we are not changing the world, then we're not doing anything important. But I would disagree. I would say, think of a teacher working one-on-one with a student. Like, if that's not meaningful, very Aaron Brockovich of me, like, if that's not, that's not meaningful, I don't know what is. And so I think there's plenty of opportunity there.
Just to start winding it down, when you go out and you proselytize on behalf of injecting fun, having fun, what thus far has the reaction been? Has it been, oh my God, it's about time? Or is it like, I've never really thought about that? Or is it even worse of like, it's not really for me?
No, it's been good. I'm trying. My head first goes to all of the negative things, as our brains tend to do. I have heard a few times, I was skeptical at first. I looked at the cover and I thought, that looks too playful for me. By the way, I love the cover, the work of Rodrigo Corral, but I have gotten some. I was a skeptic, and then I read it. Mostly what I'm getting back is this sort of resonance I've been thinking these things my entire career, and finally someone put them in a book and just said them in a way that was like better than what I was thinking. I've gotten dozens of these kinds of messages. Like, I believe in this. This is, even actually today at the conference I was at, someone came up to me and said, I actually heard about your book 2 weeks ago, because someone on my team came in with it and said, we have to order copies for everybody. This is the best book on business I've read. We need to get it out there. And so there's some real people, and I think who it lights up. Now, I'm sure there's some people who don't email me to say, I don't buy this at all. They just don't take the time, but that's fine. Like, it's not for everybody. It's for the people who I think innately feel like there's more joy that I could be getting out of my days and creating within my team. And I think that's valuable and worth paying attention to. So if that's the audience that I've got, like, those are my people.
As a penultimate question, I just want to quote back to you the title of chapter 1, and I think it speaks a bit to the don't give yourself entirely over and don't expect that you have to. And the title is most work, most days should be fun. Kind of a hedge sentence. So can you just talk a bit about that?
Yes, for sure. I guess to your previous question, there are some people who will say, oh, we can't have fun all the time. To which I say, yeah, you're right. Chapter 1, as you say, most work, most days should be fun. Because frankly, some days are terrible. I still have terrible days. I still have terrible moments, surely. And I don't feel like I'm at odds with my philosophy. Some work is just not fun. Like, now that I'm running my own business, I have to worry about expenses. Never had to do that before. I don't like it. But that's fine, right? Like, that's just part of being human. And there's a section in the book that talks about the Norwegian response to "How are you?" which is, I'm up and not crying, which is, that's plenty. It's what I put on the tote bags for the swag that I created. It's Ope Og Ike Grater. I'm up and not crying. And some days it's fine. You're vertical, your eyes aren't leaking. So in addition to hope, I hope to inspire people to see that if we believe work can be fun, then we're more likely to start making it so. And I very much hold a most things, most days philosophy, which is some days it doesn't work out. When we say, whoops, we try again the next day. And that's fine. That's more than enough. All you need is most days to have a mostly lovely, enjoyable, fun life. You're standing upright and not crying, which is something I think people who don't get a lot of sunlight would say. So there's that. Just as a final thing, Bree, when you go out and you give, you were literally giving a talk this morning. What would you hope that the person in the back that's maybe just there because it's
obligatory event to attend, what would you hope that person walks away thinking differently about, maybe doing differently in their own life and specifically at work?
I hope that they feel empowered and that it's important to start today. Like I have been around a lot of big strategic changes, a lot of, we're redoing this platform, we're redoing how we talk about our culture at scale. I mean, that's all important work and that's great. But to the individual, all I hope is that they say, today is one of my few days on the planet. It's worth making it a good day. And I have agency to make it a good day. So often, I think employees will feel like they've sold their days to their employer or sold their days to a client, that their joy doesn't matter. It's actually irrelevant, right? I'm a human resource. What do you care if I'm having fun or not? But if they can feel like I am in control of making my day a little bit more delightful, and not only is that possible, but it's actually really imperative if I'm going to find joy more than 2/7 of my life each week. And if they walk out and send a note to a friend that's like, hey, Kali, you want to grab a cup of coffee? And now they're making a friend. That's great. If they walk out and decide tomorrow for work, they're going to show up with wet hair to inspire others to be a little less professional, that's great. But mostly I don't want people to wait. And I hope that they'll feel that too.
And your comment about finding joy for 2/7 of the week is a sly reference to Canadian band Loverboy's song "Working for the Weekend." I caught that. So that's great. Bree, this has been awesome. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Charles. Such good questions.
Yeah, well, it was fun. Thanks, Bree. See ya.
See you.
We do these conversations with Lavin speakers every week. If you like what you heard, please subscribe at YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Bree or any of our other Lavin speakers, visit thelavinagency.com. Thanks for listening.